recording. Beautiful. So this teaching will be recorded, and the link to the recording will be shared on YouTube and on our platforms, so that folks who weren't able to attend in person are able to kind of see what we talked about tonight. If you have any concerns about being on camera or speak like your personage being on that YouTube recording, please feel free to put any questions, comments, concerns in the chat, and or if it's a specific question you're hoping for us to address, put it in the Q&A function so it's particularly highlighted. um we're gonna get started in just another minute or two. And while we're waiting for folks to continue to log in, um and while we do, Nubia, is there anything I'm forgetting to say or banter about as we welcome folks into this space?
No, I think you're doing a great job. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. I know we have a screen that has like just some actionable items that people can be doing, so we can maybe put that up if we want, until we get started and allow people to roll in. And then, yeah, we'll jump right into it.
Great. And yeah, so I guess the last two announcements before we get started are just we are working on trying, we being the Movement to Birth Liberation and NYCPM, are trying to organize in more accessible ways. So folks with kids, folks with disabilities can all be in on the movement. But we also have a very small team and we prep these Zoom teach-ins, and I'm still just learning this platform myself. So if you care deeply about accessibility and you want to help expand our capacity in making further future teach-ins accessible, please reach out to us and help us learn how to use the closed captioning, and maybe hook us up with ASL translators and other ways that we can make sure this space is always as inclusive as possible. We try to leave 10 minutes between 6:50 and 7 for Q&A, but we can get chatty. So we are going to really try and get all the important information in before 7 for folks who have to leave then. But we are happy to stay on afterwards if folks have comments, questions, concerns, things they want to chat about now. And obviously, we can set up future times and spaces for future conversations if they arise that are beyond the scope of this teach-in. So again, thank you all for coming in tonight and for joining us for this Zoom teach-in. I guess I'll just introduce myself super briefly and then ask Nubia to introduce herself and maybe some other members of the board, and then we'll jump into our conversation for tonight. And I think that's all we had to screen share for the immediate future. So I'm Katie Season. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the central coordinator in the Movement to Birth Liberation, which is a non hierarchical network of birth and reproductive justice activists that are working in all sorts of ways to advance reproductive justice. And so I've known many members of NYCPM for a while, and I care very deeply about this issue as a reproductive justice issue, which is why I'm so excited to be here tonight helping kind of co-host and facilitate this space to get more information out. So with that, let me pass to Nubia. Could you introduce yourself for us and any other of the board members here today who will be in
Sure.
the conversation?
Thank you, Katie. Sure. So, for those who don't know me, and also for those who do, my name is Nubia Earth Martin. I am a community birth worker and president and founder of Birth from the Earth, Inc., which is a nonprofit organization based in Yonkers. I am also co president of NYCPM. And basically, we're here tonight to discuss the community midwifery bill, steps that we've taken to get it passed, hear input from other people in the community who this bill will, impact, kind of give you updates as to where we are in the process. And I think in my introduction, I just wanted to add that a lot of people ask, well, why you? Why are you involved in this? And why are you a co-president of this and all of these things? So just a little background. I have a master's degree in midwifery from SUNY Downstate Medical Center. I'm also a current student at Jenny Joseph's Common Sense Midwifery School. We'll complete that in May. And I also am completing Mercy in Action's postgraduate degree in international midwifery. So I think that kind of tells people that I'm passionate about birth work. I'm passionate about midwifery, and people ask me why me. I think my question is why not all of us, right? So that's basically why we're here today, because we're stronger together and we all care about maternal health and wellness. And this is one of the ways that we're going to create access to more midwives and to center birthing families and people. So with that being said, I love to give some of the other board members who are presently here an opportunity to unmute and just introduce themselves briefly so everyone knows who we're talking to. And I will start with, can't see everybody. I'll start with Missy. I know she's on. And then you can pass it to the next person, Missy, because I can't see everybody on my screen.
Sure. Hi, I'm Melissa Carmen. Everyone calls me Missy. I am a CPM. I went to Birthwise Midwifery School and then to Midwives College of Utah to get my Bachelor's of Science in Midwifery. I've been one of the founding board members of NYCPM. I'm just currently a board member, and I'm doing very active in a lot of the legislative work and with the meetings and setting up meetings and stuff with the legislators, Assembly and Senate, writing letters, and big part of the postcard campaign that we did. And I'm I was the second midwife to be arrested here in New York. So Liz's case is settled, but I have my trial coming up in May. Sue Derby. Sue, you're muted.
Sorry, I forgot I'm muted. Hi, I'm Sue Derby. I'm a CPM. I've been a CPM since around, I believe, 1993. I've wanted to be licensed and included in the healthcare system for even before that, before there even was a CPM, and have been practicing, I think, since 1989. I've been very active recently in the legislative work to try to get the CPM bill passed, and I'm hopeful that it will. So that's about it.
And we can pass it to.
Oh, I'm the assistant secretary of NYCPM.
Yes. I think we also have Janae is on. Janae, if you want to unmute and introduce yourself.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I do apologize for not being on camera. My name is Janae Segis. I am currently a student CPM attending the National Midwifery Institute. And the reason that, I'm part of this mission is because I know that there is a crisis. There is a crisis within the birthing world, within maternal health care. And I believe that CPMs are part of the answer to meeting that crisis. So I am passionate about this work and everything that is being done to ensure that we help to curb the general crisis.
Thank you. And do you want to tell them what your role is with NYCPM?
Yes, I'm sorry. I am the vice president with NYCPM.
Thank you. And then I see Janice Gilden is on. So Janice, if you can unmute, and I believe Liz is jumping on at 6:15. So.
Hi, can you hear me? I'm in my car driving home.
We can hear you loud and clear.
Wonderful. Hi, my name is Janice Gilden. I am a CPM. I live in New York and I practice in New Jersey. I'm coming home from a day of prenatals. I went to Birthwise, and I am a founding member of NYCPM. I'm a board member with no particular title right now. I'm also affiliated with the Birth Futures Foundation, proud to be. And I feel passionate about the need to decentralize and decolonize our maternal health system. And the best way to do that is in community. So community midwives, bringing birth into the community as is in the global arena. And this is where I feel New York needs to stand. Happy to be here with all of you, and thank you for attending.
Thank you. And are there any other NYCPM board members on that I don't see? I know Liz is going to be
Yeah.
jumping on.
Hi, Nubia.
the team.
I just arrived.
Oh,
And
hi.
Sandra's on
Great.
too.
So we're just
Hey there.
we're
you see
doing
me?
introductions. Yes, I see you now. Thank you. Yeah, so we're just introducing ourselves. So go ahead.
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Catlin. I'm a CPM that just came off of 3 years of persecution for practicing midwifery in New York State. And the need for midwives in my own community is great. And so that I'm using my story to just show the need. So that's my goal, is to get CPMs licensed here in New York State.
Perfect. Thank you. I don't think I missed anybody.
Sandra's on.
Oh, Sandra. Okay. I don't know. I can't see everybody in this format. Go ahead, Sandra. Introduce yourself. Or we can come back to Sandra. But I know that Sandra is a CPM student at the Midwives College of Utah. And I'll just say, Sandra is a native to New York, would love to come back and serve her community here in New York. And that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about tonight in terms of why this bill is so important, and that, New York is one of the few states that does not recognize the certified professional midwife as a legal pathway. And that's important because we have a huge maternal mortality and morbidity rate crisis that we're in the midst of for all birthing people, specifically for those of color. In New York, our numbers stand out a little bit more than other states, and that Black women die 8 to 12 times more, as opposed to 3 to 4 times more in the rest of the country. And I think that is directly related to the fact that we do not have CPMs here. We don't have enough birth workers and midwives who are educated, trained specifically for out-of-hospital birth, which we know is evidence-based the safest place to give birth if you're having a healthy, low-risk pregnancy. So this bill is essentially ensuring the fact that those who want to serve their communities here in New York, those who are specifically trained in that type of setting, who are of their community, are able to do that. And especially in locations where there is simply not access to other care. I live in New York, in Yonkers, and we have one hospital in all of our city, and that hospital has a 45% C-section rate. I have 5 children. I had my first 2 there before I knew better. When I sought out midwifery care for my third, I had to leave New York and go to New Jersey to find a midwife who, one, looked like me, understood me culturally, who was willing to care for me. And that really changed my whole perspective on midwifery. And we know that we have other areas in New York where there's an even bigger, access, situation. And I know, Missy can speak to that, and Liz can also speak to that. But it's a huge problem when we're not centering birthing people, we're not centering birthing families and what their options, are, and where they'd like to birth and with whom. And I think, we're all here because we want to see this actually come to fruition. So in addition to talking about some of the barriers to access to care, we're also going to talk about where we are in the bill process. So I'm going to kick it to Katie because I know she has some specific questions and topics that she's going to throw out to all of the board members for us to answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Nubia, so much, and for all of the board members, so much for all of your work serving in your communities, for all of your work organizing around this issue, and for being here tonight to share about it with the larger public. When I imagine who is watching, or when I see who is watching, and when I imagine who will watch this teach-in, they're kind of two groups of people. So I'm assuming there's going to be some people who really care about reproductive justice, but may not know a ton about midwifery or the different types of midwives, or really anything much more specifically than they care about reproductive justice. And so for the first half, we're going to be kind of delving in a little bit more, and having the board share kind of what is a CPM, kind of, elaborating on what Nubia just spoke about of increasing birth options and out of birth options. And then there's also a bunch of you here tonight who could walk circles around me, and know just as much as some of the board members about CPM and midwifery issues. And we're really glad you're here tonight because there's some political education that we'd like to do. And in the birth world, there's some folks who know our issues very deeply, but not necessarily how to work within Albany to make sure that we are heard and that our issues are advanced in a timely manner. So we are stick in for the first 15 minutes of a little bit of review, and stick around for that poly education of how we can be working together and building really a movement to advance this legislation and other legislation that we'll need to do in the future to really achieve reproductive justice in New York. So Nubia, you already really started answering this question, but today's teach-in, we marketed it as expanding midwifery access in New York. So could you tell us a little bit about what why isn't midwifery care currently very accessible in New York, and what is the legislation you've been working on, and how does it address this issue?
Sure. Well, I think all of us on the board can touch on this a little bit, but I gave my personal, background in terms of really having to search for somebody to provide care for me for my last 3 pregnancies and my 3 home births. But also, I'll say from a midwife's perspective, in terms of the education that I received, it was a wonderful education. It prepared me really well for midwifery in a hospital setting, but I knew that I did not want to work in a hospital setting. So I think, currently, for those who aren't aware, the 2 pathways that are legally recognized here in New York are CNM and CM, which is Certified Nurse Midwife and Certified Midwife. But all of my experience in out of hospital birth was post-graduation. The last few years have been really about sitting with other midwives who've had private practices, doing my own independent research and education on alternatives to just, pharmacology and medicalized birth. And I think that's really important because, again, with the statistic that talks about when people are experiencing a healthy, low-risk pregnancy, they don't need all of those, extra things. So when we don't have enough providers who understand out of hospital birth, who are deeply committed to it, who feel passionate about it, who can legally provide that care, you have a group of people that ends up having birth experiences that are highly medicalized, that perpetuate birth trauma. And in the most extreme situations, we have maternal deaths that could be preventable. And the majority of the maternal deaths for Black women and women of color are preventable, deaths. So access to this bill is going to allow for people to have a variety of different types of midwives who can provide care for them. And when we talk about community midwifery, what I love about that is it's really specific to where you're going to be serving. Different communities have different needs. And for the last 10, almost 15 years, my call and response in my community, I really like to amplify the voices of the people and what it is that they want. So rather than coming in and saying, oh, we know exactly what you need, it's really about delving into and being immersed in that community and knowing that those needs can shift over time. And midwives are nothing if not, adaptable, right? That's what we do. We provide one-to-one, individualized care. And I think that cannot always happen when we are in or within the medical industrial complex, where you don't always have that time to sit with somebody for 45 minutes to an hour. You don't get to address not only their physical needs, but also their emotional needs, their mental needs, their spiritual needs, nutritional needs. So I'm really dedicated to making sure, and I think we all are, that people have choices and they have options and they have safe avenues to receive culturally competent and respectful care. And I will allow anybody else from the board to kind of jump in and give their perspective on that question as well.
I would say, if I may, that the educational opportunities are also a huge barrier here in New York that has, um, like I think, we have a couple people on our board that actually have to have an address outside of New York State in order to attend a school, because these schools, to become a CPM, don't have a contract with New York State. So I think this further puts up this just a huge, like if I wanted to live in Texas, let's say, I can't get the education that I want, and that is wrong on multiple levels. And I think it specifically targets people of color, that they don't have access to a more affordable education, and that the only education available is, people who live near New York City area, at least the distance wise would be closer. But for the rest of New York, which is a huge state, we don't have access to that. So besides the affordability, location, and you have schools that absolutely forbid you to have preceptorships in out of hospital or community setting. So that's a further barrier. And if they find out that you have done this, there's repercussions. So I just wanted to say that about the education. So this will open up educational opportunities for people who choose this route to midwifery.
Melissa, thank you so much for explaining that. You actually scooped, because my next question was, how does this bill also make it easier for people to become midwives? So I guess I just want to, Nubia, Melissa, those were amazing explanations, and I just kind of want to repeat them back to you, and you can tell me if I've understood them correctly. So essentially, right now in New York, to practice as a midwife, you need to be a certified midwife or a certified nurse midwife, both of which require attending a master's degree program at an accredited university. And only after which can you take your boards to become certified, to become licensed to practice midwifery. So essentially, anybody who, and in New York, those four, we only have 4 master's degree programs. 3 of them are in the city, and 1 of them is in Long Island. So if you were like me and lived in Binghamton, New York, and lived like 2 miles from a nursing school, you still had to up and relocate to New York City if you actually wanted hands-on midwifery training. And then if I wanted out of birth training experience, which I did, out of luck, because kind of consequence of needing to go through the university programs is university programs can only place their students in clinical placements where people have malpractice insurance, and New York has made it so infeasible for home birth midwives to carry malpractice insurance that university trained midwives rarely, if ever, get out of hospital clinical experience during their training. And if they do have out of hospital clinical experience, it's normally something that they have gone to at great lengths, great extents to set up for themselves, or done after their completion of their master's degree program, which if you spend the money on the master's degree program, you want to be more or less done when you're done, and not have to like keep doing more and more trainings because you weren't able to have access to all birth environments and settings during school. So one way that this bill will really help expand, okay, and then the other thing is, many of you have mentioned that you practice in other states, and so some of you are thinking like, are there something different about birthing people in New Jersey that they can safely receive care from these midwives, but in New York their uteruses change and like it's all of a sudden not appropriate? Exactly. Like we've created this issue through a long history of uh, a long history that there's a great Spotify pod that we don't have time to get into now, but you should listen to the Spotify podcast about. Um, and so 30 other states allow CPMs or apprentice trained midwives to practice, and they are practicing safely in those states. So when we say that by passing a CPM bill that would allow CPMs to have licensure and practice legally in New York, we're saying we're going to expand the midwifery workforce because we're literally like doubling the number of people who qualify to practice midwifery in New York.
Right. Right.
Like right off the bat. And then going forward, all of these other, pretty much anyone who doesn't live in New York City, anyone who doesn't want to do a university program, anybody who doesn't want exclusively hospital based training will have an option and an avenue through the CPM route without having to move out of state. So
Right.
when we talk about increases the midwifery workforce, it opens up innumerable more opportunities for midwives, particularly in rural areas, and underserved areas, underserved because we've intentionally underserved them, and underserved areas so that they now get served.
Right.
And
I just wanted to,
yeah,
I just wanted to add before I forget, because I'm like intently listening to you, but I'm like, oh my gosh, if I don't say it, I'm gonna forget also. Yes, so everything that you just kind of summarized is correct. And this bill would allow for other programs to be recognized. Individuals would still sit for a credentialing exam through NARM, right? So there's still, it's just different pathways of education, but you're still sitting, for an exam with a certifying body. So I just wanted to make that clear because I think some people think, oh, so someone could just wake up tomorrow and say, I want to be a midwife, and that would no, there's pathways to this, but it would allow for more opportunities. And you touched on the fact that this would make an impact for student midwives of color and Black student midwives, which is true because the whole thing of having to be displaced from your community to go get an education, sometimes across the country and in places where you're not familiar with, that for me, is a big throwback to things and traumas that happened during the transatlantic slave trade when we were separated from our communities and then having to kind of reorient yourself. I know a couple of students who have left New York because they're pursuing the CPM credential, and they've been placed in preceptors, situations in sundown, towns. If you don't know what that is, Google it because we don't have time to get into all of that. Or in places where they are not just accepted by the community. So it's also perpetuating harm and trauma, and this would allow them to stay in the state where they want to provide this care. I also saw somebody in the chat was saying, or since COVID, you could practice as a CPM New York if you were licensed in one of the other 37 states, right? Well, yes, there was a temporary executive order that has been continued, but that's not very stable. What if tomorrow they wanted to end that? So what if you had committed to caring for somebody, right? And now they're maybe in their 8th or 9th month of pregnancy, and then it's taken away, right? So the whole thing about that is if we're saying that COVID itself was a crisis and please, you're qualified, come in and help, then it's really an insult, in my opinion, to say that, the maternal health crisis that we have going on and Black women dying 8 to 12 times more, is that not a crisis? So how do you recognize it in one setting and not recognize it in the other setting? So that's just wanted to add that as I saw the chat going.
yeah.
And again, anybody else from, the
Or
board.
Nubia or anyone else for the board, because Nubia
Yeah.
said this quickly. Can you just re-explain how crazy the whole COVID emergency order CPM shenanigans has been? Can someone give us like a 2-minute breakdown of like just how crazy our government has chosen to deal with this licensure throughout the pandemic?
So what we do know is that there was an executive order that was put out by Governor Cuomo, and then there was about a month and a half when we didn't have the executive order in place after he was gone, and then Kathy Hochul came in, and then she reinstituted the different executive order number, but the same wording basically. And that order is still in place today. We know that there's been approximately a 20 to 22% increase in home births.
And
And there's
sorry, what does that order say, or like allow differently?
it basically says that any midwife who is licensed in any other state may practice in New York State without civil or criminal prosecution. And so that has given some protection to people, but like Nubia mentioned, at any moment that executive order could be gone, and then we're back to being, we could be arrested for a felony again. So and so we know that there's been an increase in home births, community births, and we know that there has been a decrease in NICU admissions during this same period of time. So those two are that that they go hand in hand, and we know that just on I can only speak to the upstate peer review group. We have transfer rates and C-section rates that are far, far below, what we see in even level 1 hospitals. I don't have the number on the NICU admissions. I just know that there was a study put out that NICU admissions decreased during COVID. So I could probably find that study pretty easily.
Yeah.
Someone put in the chat there. And also, just we were talking just a little bit about barriers. The fact that the continued criminalization of a midwife and a healthcare professional who, when integrated in the healthcare system, shows a positive change in 37 other states and in all the places where midwives are integrated. That's an issue, and we know that criminalization of all decisions in childbirth, parenting, and stuff goes on every single day, from people getting called, like CPS being called because you wouldn't administer vitamin K, or you wouldn't choose a vaccine, or you co-sleep. All these things, every time you as a parent makes a decision regarding your own bodily autonomy and healthcare and that of your offspring, the state and or government agencies are involved in trying to criminalize that. And I think this bill helps to knock that barrier down as well.
Absolutely. So like one of the common sense, so we're about to transition into kind of how to talk to your legislators about this, how we can push this bill through. But one of the things this is making me think of is one of the very common sense arguments you can make to your legislator if they come back with questions is like, well, CPMs have been practicing in the state throughout the whole pandemic, and we've only seen an improvement in outcomes. Like, why would you, again, there's nothing different about the birthing people in all these other states where people are practicing safely than in New York. So we're really just bringing ourselves in line with other states with better maternal health outcomes and smaller maternal infant health racial disparities. So that's kind of something to keep in your back pocket, is like, it's not like they haven't been working here before. Seriously, for the past 2 years, they've been taking a lot of births and relieving the pressure on the hospitals during the pandemic. And we're just essentially allowing them to keep doing the great, safe, amazing work that they have been doing without threat of legal prosecution. So we are going to soon transition into the legislative stuff, but before we do, was there anything I forgot to ask? Anything that board members really, feel passionate to contribute, or like I think I forgot to ask anything you want to say before we kind of shift into get it past gear.
Yeah, I was just looking at the chat. So Vicky Headley was saying, do we have numbers of how many CPMs have come in from other states? And then she says, I don't think so. I don't think it's trackable because they don't have to register. I wonder if we have our own anecdotal information on this. So this is where, in my opinion, a lot of qualitative data comes in handy, right? So even if we don't necessarily have like percentages or all of that, but actually amplifying the voices of those who have been cared for by CPMs who have utilized this executive order, who have, risen to the occasion to provide this care for the communities that need it. And then having those families or those, birthing mothers also talk about their experiences, especially during the pandemic. I know I saw a huge increase in my community of people considering thinking about and then ultimately having a home birth. And at the height of the pandemic, I know there were a lot of, I won't say a lot, but enough midwives who were saying, well, I don't want to take somebody, out of fear because they probably wouldn't have chose home birth before. And if they choose home birth now, then it's going to be, and I said, well, I don't think so. What I'm really seeing is people, fear kind of propelling them to seek out more knowledge and then them stepping into their own power. And for me, for a lot of the women of color and Black women who I had the honor to be, birth assisting other home birth midwives during the pandemic for, what I noticed was that fear basically kind of propel them to knowing their own strength. And it reminded me of how during the transatlantic slave trade, right, we might often be escaping and running. We might be big and pregnant, but we might stop, squat, have our baby, strap our baby to our back and keep going. So I saw that same level of just power and like inner knowing. And I think during the pandemic, we also had more time to reflect on, if I'm not sick, do I need to be in a hospital? Is pregnancy actually a medical condition? And these are the things that, as midwives, we educate people about. So, yeah. So I think to segue, and then someone said, I hope we can get those consumers to speak up. Yeah. And I know they will, right? Because they do come out. Like once you've been, touched and cared for by a midwife, you want other people to know those experiences. So I believe that they will. We just have to ask. And we see in a lot of the, work that we're doing to get this bill passed, when we reach out to community, they respond, they show up. So now we're just making sure that everybody is showing up, the people who are going to be impacted by this to provide the care and the people who are also going to be receiving the care. And to that end, I'm going to segue into, so how do we get this bill passed? And just basically say, to Katie, who I've known for many, many years, we both went to SUNY Downstate, different cohorts, but have been, just stayed in touch with each other because of reproductive justice work. And I'm so happy to see Movement Mondays back and kicking it off for 2022 today. Can you tell us just a little bit about your backgrounds in working to get legislation, pushed through, working to make sure that communities are centered in their needs, and then tell us a little bit more about what next steps we can be taking based on where we are right now with the bill and where we are in this legislative session.
Sure. So I guess a little bit about my background is I was going to midwifery school with Nubia, and that was really the first time I had heard about one of the lectures there was one of the first times I had heard about the racial health disparity statistics that were like current and for New York City. And at the time I was working as a neonatal intensive care nurse at a hospital downstate affiliated with our midwifery school, where over 90% of our patient population was Black. So I knew immediately that if Black babies were 3 times more likely to die before the first birthday, those weren't like random statistic babies out there in the world. Those were the babies I was caring for. And if me, as an experienced NICU nurse and a soon to be midwife, couldn't really explain what was happening that was causing such disparities in their health and life outcomes, then that was problematic and I needed to do something about it. And so I stayed on in my position as a nurse after I graduated midwifery school, and essentially have segued from there into whistleblowing, into organizing around the structural issues that made SUNY Downstate such an unplaced such an unsafe place to receive and deliver care. And kind of, it's been a journey. Early on, I was, just calling senators mad, like, you should fix downstate. And they're like, we've been trying for a while. It would help if other people started a campaign. And I was like, start a campaign? I'm a nurse. 6 months later, I'm like starting a campaign. So I've essentially in the past 3 or 4 years have been working with any reproductive justice, birth worky focused folks to help them get their legislation passed so we can build coalition and really address structural issues. So the first campaign was Equity for Downstate, which has helped reinstate $50 million of funding for downstate every year that would previously been withheld for them because of structural racism. And then I've also worked with the birth center folks to try and work on the birth center bill, and have led an effort to amend the New York Health Act, which would provide universal guaranteed health insurance to all New Yorkers. And I helped lead a group of birth workers to amend the language of that so it works out better for birth workers and birthing people. And so that we're more centered in that program, when it passes. So I'm really excited today to share with you all kind of the things I've learned about how to successfully advocate for reproductive justice and push reproductive justice initiatives through in Albany, and doing it in a way that really centers our midwifery values, and the kind of unique particularly for many folks on the team are birth workers, and organizing in ways that work particularly well for the idiosyncrasies that birth workers have in our lives, like sometimes being out at a 3-day birth and needing 2 days to recover. So we're gonna work together and work in teams to get this done. I think, oops, nope, I don't want to do that. So to get that started, I'm going to share my screen, and if Janae, you could just give me hosting. Perfect. I'm going to share my screen, and the first thing I just kind of want to go through with folks is, how they, so essentially, to get a bill passed, we need legislators to support it. To get your legislator support, you need to know who they are to get in contact with them. And so the first thing I want to share with you, for folks who may not already know, is how to find out who your state level representatives are. Now, the number one thing that happens when I ask people who their state senator is they tell me who their federal congressperson is back. And that is great. And I'm so excited that they are paying attention generally to local politics. But your federal congressperson will not be able to help us much in this particular effort, because it's a state level bill that gets passed in Albany, and the folks who vote on it are your state assembly member, which is essentially equivalent to your congressperson, and your state senator, which is the upper lower house that we have in Washington, we also have in Albany. So I'm wondering if there's a brave volunteer who may not know their state reps off the top of their head, who would let me look up. You don't have to give me your actual address, but like choose a supermarket nearby that will likely be in your district, and we'll look up who your reps are together and go from there.
Katie, there's some sort of background noise happening.
You told me that
I
nobody
don't know
would
if
be
there's
able to
another
help them.
tab playing or something.
Oh, there's background noise coming from or just from the Zoom?
From the Zoom, I think maybe somebody needed to mute.
Yeah, I just forgot to mute. Oh, and Ellie, thank you. I previously mentioned a Q&A function. We don't have that. My bad.
Oh, okay.
So silly. So if you have a question, you really want to make sure it gets addressed, just put it in the chat. Janae is going to be helping track those till the end. If we don't get to it, and especially when we're in the Q&A part, just copy paste it so it re-ups it in the chat, and we'll make sure we get to it. I apologize for saying there were features on this Zoom. There weren't. On that note, any volunteers that would like to look up their state senator and see if they are currently in support of this bill?
I'll give you mine, Katie, since I was.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ellie. Now, give me either your address or an address nearby.
191 Madison Street in Brooklyn.
191 Madison Street, and you'll see it autofills usually. Okay. First thing, if you live in the 5 boroughs of New York City, you're going to use this website that I'm on right now, mygov.nyc. If you live outside of the 5 boroughs of New York City, you're going to use this link to openstates.org. It's just that Open States will also show you your state reps, but Who Represents Me shows you your city representatives if you live in the city, which I think is also important. Great. So thank you so much. So now that we have put in Ellie's address or an address nearby, we can see these are her city reps. These are her federal reps. So all of us have Schumer and Kristen Gillibrand as our federal senators. That's not who we're looking for right now. We're going to this state tab and we see that her assembly member is Member Sufrant Forrest and her senator is Jabari Brisport. Now, so the very first thing in helping get this bill passed is knowing, does the person who represents me already support it? And so to do that, you have to know who represents me. Now that you've figured out who represents you, how do you know whether or not they support this bill? Are you gonna like comb through every tweet, everything they've ever said ever to see if they support it? Aha, there's a way to essentially Google search and find whether or not they are publicly in support of that bill. So even if you don't remember the bill letter numbers, the official title, pretty much if you get kind of the main words of the bill that you're looking for and the word New York. So you see here, I did not remember what it was titled, the official title, or the thing. I was just like, it's about community midwifery. It's a bill in New York, and the first 2 results are exactly what I'm looking for. So, and you'll know that it is what you're looking for first, because you're going to see that there's a .gov. So it's a government website that has like the current and most up-to-date bill information. And then when you get there, you are going to check and just double check and make sure you are looking at the current version of the bill. So for example, this says 2021-22 legislative session. Perfect. There you could accidentally click on like a bill that was proposed in 1995. That is not useful to us. So just first I check, is this the government website? Then I check, am I in my right legislative session? And then when you scroll down, you'll find all of this great, right here is you can download the text, the PDF bill, the PDF text of the bill. And if you scroll down, you can find all of this great other information about the bill, like who's the primary sponsor, Julia Salazar, who represents a neighboring district from Senator Brisport in Brooklyn. And then you can see here co-sponsors, view additional co-sponsors. We have Senator Jackson, Kennedy, May, Parker, Skoufis, and Wake. So right now we currently have 7 of the 63 state senators in New York publicly in support of this bill. So if you looked up, and please do make this participatory, and as I'm chatting, use these links, look these things up as you go. If you can't see well on my screen share, I can put the link right in the chat. And also, you all just learned how easy it is to Google to find the bill. Oh my God, my computer's gonna run out of battery. Just give me 1 second.
So yeah, so if you haven't already checked to see if you're,
So sorry about that.
that's okay. I'm just gonna fill in if it took you a
Yeah.
minute to go get your cord. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm good now, but if you had something to say, I won't want to. Okay, so you've looked up who your senator is, and now you're looking to see which senators are in support. And so now Ellie knows, and actually I'm also in Senator Brisport's district, that Senator Brisport is not yet in support of this bill. Oh, sad. Okay, now why wouldn't your senator be in support of this bill? So there's a spectrum of answers to that. There's probably a very small handful of senators who have heard about this bill and have reservations before signing on, and we're working on them to work through those reservations. And then I think there's probably the rest of the Senate that just hasn't heard of it yet, because there's 2, 4, 5, 600 bills that go through every legislative session in Albany, and they don't have time to read them all. They don't have time to sign on to co-sponsor them all, and they are very receptive to the input that they get from their constituents as to where of those 500 or 600 bills where they should focus their time and attention on giving their support and helping pass it through. So Senator Brisport, Senator Brisport came to a teach-in like this of mine when he was a candidate, like in person 3 years ago. I have a ton of respect for the guy and really think he will sign on as soon as he hears about this. And it will just be up to us in Central Brooklyn to work together to get it on his radar and have him co-sponsor.
I just see Missy's hand raised. So
Yeah, go
ahead,
ahead.
Missy.
I just wanted to address something in the chat. I know it seems disappointing to see only 7 out of the 63. Keep in mind that we have contacted and sent information to every single senator in the state. Okay. On top of that, they've also received numerous dozens and dozens of postcards as well. And we have another postcard campaign that's going out. And just because they haven't co-sponsored doesn't mean they aren't supportive. So we do have commitments of support from other senators. They just haven't officially signed on as co-sponsor. And there have been bills that have passed, including the birth center bill, that have passed with far less co-sponsors than we have on our bill. So just to keep that in mind, and then you'll hear how many we have on the assembly.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add that Dalit added in the chat. That's why we need you all. They want to hear from the constituents. So yes, of course, midwives and birth workers saying we need this bill. They're like, okay, yes, we hear that. But they also want to hear from the people who would be receiving care, from these midwives. They also want to hear from the people in the community. Is this something that they're in support of? How has a midwife changed your, birthing experience? What positive, things have you taken from that? So yes, it's all hands on deck.
Yes, absolutely. It is great that we have been able to get literature out to the senators. Now that we know that, you can, when you contact them, be like, I think they've already sent you some literature about the importance of this bill. But for most politicians, the number one reason why they would be hesitant to publicly put their name on a piece of legislation is that the people who vote for them would find out about it, not be pleased or impressed, and then have political ramifications for them the next time they are up for election. So if the only thing they hear about this, so if they got a thing in the mail, but they haven't heard from any of their constituents, they may not think that it's worth the risk of potentially signing on to something that they may hear later on, riled their constituents. But if all they hear is call after call of this is great, please prioritize it, I'm your constituent, I'd love to see it go through, then if God forbid in the future anybody was mad at your politician, was like, why did you sign on to that bill? You can say the politician can honestly respond, because a lot of your neighbors thought it was a good idea and asked me to, and if you're saying it didn't have the intended effect, let's work together for something better. But by being a constituent who asks their representative to do this instead of an organization asking a representative who doesn't necessarily directly represent that person from the organization who's asking, that's kind of where we may be able to see like a lot of a tidal wave of support coming through is when the demand and the requests are coming from constituents.
Yeah, and I see also another comment, sorry, in the chat, Monique Wiggins is asking, do we have talking points? And then, okay, Liz just answered her that yes, there are talking points. We can
Yes.
email them to you. Yeah.
So, there are talking points, and if someone from the board can start dropping the links to the membership form, the Friends of NYCPM form, your petition, your toolkit, all of the links that you want folks to be following up on, please do. And I think Monique also asked, like, is it important that they sign on as co-sponsors? So having a ton of co-sponsors does not a passed bill make, but it does make a really strong statement in particularly in the political world and for the legislators who are voting on this, of like, oh, a lot of my colleagues also agree, a lot of my colleagues have also signed on. And so again, if it ever comes back to like, why did you sign this bill, you can say, well, it wasn't just me, 40 other people thought it was a good idea at the time.
Yeah.
And it shows, I think, particularly for us, CPM licensure is an issue we've been weaving around for almost 30 years. And by creating this relationship these relationships with our legislators, like I said, this isn't the last time we're going to have to get in touch with them about a reproductive justice issue. So we're starting to build those connections and adequately showing that, like, we say that this bill has a statewide impact, and we're showing this bill has a statewide impact. Senator May represents Syracuse. Alexis Weck, I've never seen on a bill before because she's a Republican and I'm usually looking at really progressive stuff, and she represents Long Island. This is awesome. We have like literally all the directions of New York coming together.
All the players are at the party. And just in addition to, support on the Senate level, we also, have support on the Assembly level. And then somebody was just asking, where is this bill currently sitting? Somebody answered her. So I'm glad that people kind of know and are aware it's sitting in higher ed. And then the follow-up question to that, which is, the question of the hour. So how do we get it out of higher ed and get it onto the floor to a vote?
Oh, thank you, Nubia. And I'm so sorry for everyone who I said we get you off by 7. We will get you off by 7:05 with the most critical info, and then take any conversations from there. So yes, I just switched over to see the Assembly version of that bill, where you can see the prime sponsor is Gottfried and all the additional co-sponsors. This is where you can really see the board's hard work over this past year, getting in touch with all of these Assembly members and having them sign on. It's fantastic to have. I think we have like 32-ish plus co-sponsors in the 35. So I'm just a bill sitting on Capitol Hill. How does this bill actually get passed and become law? Well, right now it is stuck in the Higher Ed Committee. And so essentially the chair of the Senate Higher Ed Committee, Senator Stavitsky, and the chair of the Assembly Higher Ed Committee, Assemblymember Deborah Glick, essentially a lot of the power is in their hands right now as to whether or not they decide to advance it out of committee and onto the floor. And so that is, so one of the other things I wanted to show folks is using our example with Ellie being a Bridgeport Siouxfront Forest constituent. You can see that Fair of Siouxfront Forest was one of the early supporters of this bill. And let's find out a little bit more about her. I Google her, I get her government site the first try, and then I want to know, well, could she help us get this bill out of higher committee? I wonder what committees she sits on. So I look up her committee membership and ding, 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 she's on the committee for higher education. Whoop, whoop. So if you see that your person is in support of this bill, already is a co-sponsor, but they are also on the board of higher education, we really need you making the loveliest phone calls ever, because you can just start and stay grateful and say thank you so much for your support of this bill and for becoming a co-sponsor. I know that you're on the higher education committee. Can you please make sure it gets out of committee and onto the floor this session? It's very important to me as a constituent. Insert your individual reasons. It's important to the state. Insert the talking points that we are sending through to you in the chat now. And kind of hopefully that creates some internal pressure where it's, if everybody on the committee is saying to the chair, I'm getting calls from my constituents, why aren't we passing it? I think that is probably one of the most realistic ways that we can assert pressure on Assemblymember Glick and Senator Stavitsky to advance these bills. I know that NYCPM has had multiple conversations with them to explain why this is important, and I think at this point it is a matter of some public pressure. You'll see if you check out Deborah Glick's public profile on Twitter, she says, I am a pro-choice state legislator. And so I think you could definitely, certainly if your persons are already co-sponsoring this bill, just start calling Glick directly and being like, my representatives already support this bill. I see that you are pro-women's choices. How about women's choices to have out-of-hospital birth options? Because that's what this bill that you are holding up is addressing. So those are some of the ways that we will be working together to put pressure on our legislator to get this bill passed and through this session. And then in the forms, please, 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 if you haven't been getting emails from the Movement to Birth Liberation in the past, if you have not yet filled out forms to either become a friend or a member of NYCPM, now would be an amazing time to do it. You can open the links to the form and just save them if you need to fill them out later. But essentially, the membership form is for people who either are or planning to be or are very dedicated for whatever reasons to the CPM cause. And the Friends of form is if you want to be kept in the loop and generally supportive, but aren't necessarily like wanting to be a member of a CPM organization. Please fill out the Friends of form, and we will be doing our best to keep everyone in the loop as we go forward in the next 2 months. There are only 2 months in the year in New York where we can get bills passed, and it's April and May. So please keep your eye out for our announcements, for our emails and calls to actions, because now is go time to make sure we don't have to wait for 2023 to, essentially we'd have to wait again to April 2023 again before we get this bill passed if we're not successful in the next 2 months. So I look forward to seeing all your form responses coming in and working with you going forward.
Yes.
I think those are all the big things for tonight. And but obviously, I think a lot of us are happy to stay on for a while for questions, comments, concerns. So Nubia, whatever you had to say next. And I think I saw Melissa raising her hand.
Yeah, that was essentially what I was going to say with respect to time. If you do have to jump off, we understand. We're really just grateful that people, came out on a Monday to, listen to where we're at, see how you can help. But if people do have questions, we can continue to use the chat feature for, I don't know, how long you guys want to hang out with us. But we're happy to further the conversation if there are people who want to hang out and have some questions that we didn't answer in this lovely teaching. So please utilize the chat. For those who have to go, thank you so much for joining us. Janae said this question was asked earlier. Are there a few good key stats available on the improved outcomes that we can use or cite as we begin this advocacy? Thank you. So I know Missy said she's going to share that article about decreased NICU.
Yeah, I'll have to find that. And just to point out too that
I'm
we
sure
have
there probably
over
are some other ones. Okay.
Can you hear me or no?
Yeah, you came in and out for a second, but I can hear you.
Okay, sorry. There are over half of the higher ed committee on the assembly is already co-sponsored the bill. So
Okay.
we're really hoping that key people, Sarah Clark and Mark Wolzik, can put pressure on Deborah Glick. So if those people are in your area, you know, we need to put pressure on Deborah. Also, Dick Gottfried has already filed an Article 99 to force Glick to hear the bill this session. And talking to Dick Godfrey's office, the budget has not been finalized. So it is still going on. So that's less time, even less time, because that the budget monopolizes all their time.
Yeah. Okay. Those are really good additional points. Thank you. And just in terms of, budget, one of the big points that we've been pushing when we're talking to, different assembly people and senators is that this bill will cost you zero, right? There's not money that needs to, go out for this. It will actually save New York money. It will save, lives as well. It will improve birth outcomes and also experiences, which I think we don't always put the same value on that. Like we'll talk about the numbers, but we don't always talk about people's experiences. And having the hospital experience and the home birth experience for myself, I know it's a huge impact on potential future birth trauma, So I think we always have to look at not just the quantitative, although that is important, and we can actually use any of those studies when we're talking to our people, right? But also the qualitative. I think that's really important. And
Monique mentioned there's a person on here named Monique. I'm not sure what the pronouns are. Sorry, because I can't see everybody, but that person mentioned in the very beginning of the chat that they saw some good things about the bill and some sad things. I was curious if that person could elaborate a little bit about that.
Is Monique still on? I'm trying to scroll through this. See. Yeah. So if you feel comfortable,
Yeah,
Monique,
I had to unmute myself. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, cool.
I couldn't find the button.
No worries. Hi, how are you? Welcome.
Hi, thank you. I'm learning so much here with you ladies. I think I was trying to say I didn't get to see what my question was because I forgot. It was like because I'm just trying to process all of this information. I was trying to say, can somebody read it back to me? Because
I think I remember it. I can't scroll back because I got booted out and then I had to come back in. But it said something about you saw wasn't happy, but you saw some maybe positive things about the bill, but also sad things.
I think I was talking about what's the whole movement in general, because I just came into this because of my friend's niece that passed away in Queens General Hospital, and this whole thing just got on my radar. I don't have children, of my own or any children, period. So it's shocking. That's why. So I'm learning good things, in the movement, like what you ladies are saying. But the sad things is like a lot of people don't get it. We was Charlene, for instance, the president of DC's Purple Heart Foundation, co-president, was at a rally with Jamani Williams, and it was posted, via the media online, and the comments under it was even though they explained what the problem was, the comments was, well, why don't they eat better? And I'm like, that has nothing to do with what's going on. I shared one of the links to something that the government had posted. It was on I think it's the CDC website, the mortality rates and all that stuff, and the study that Governor Cuomo started in 2018, that panel that he enacted, what they found, you know, it's just, how do you fight with the people that you're trying to get to support you as well as the politicians? Because it's just frustrating. So that's why I made that comment that I found interesting was good things. Yes, Melissa, yes. I found good things and I found sad things, and that was most of the sad things. And I'm hearing more sad things about what the lady Glick, she's blocking it for what? What's her reason for not supporting this? That's all. Thank you. I hope I made sense.
You did.
Yes,
Thank you
thank
so
you
much.
so
And
much, Monique.
so sorry for your loss.
Yes, very sorry. But we're
Yeah, I think
hoping
there's
to.
been, go ahead, Missy. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I maybe my airplane buds here are messing things up. But I think the biggest things that that are holding it up on Glick's end, just from the kind of the legislative political end of things, are that despite countless conversations, emails, even sending her like stuff in the mail, like a binder in the mail, her gatekeeper has some misconceptions about the bill. And I think Monique, you mentioned, how do we fight that? There's going to be people in comments that aren't going to have all of the information. So our job is to bring evidence to to the people that can make this bill go forward. Bring stories, bring cases, bring studies, and kind of forget the people that are saying all the maybe negative things, like that comment that you mentioned. Because the bottom line is the evidence shows differently, that when women of color are taken care of by people who look like them and they're under the care of a midwife, the outcomes are better. So that we have proof of. So everything else they say, oh, it's because they don't eat well or whatever. We know that that's crap. So we have to bring that proof. I'm sorry, I don't remember his name. He's the new mayor in Brooklyn. He's a man of color.
Eric Adams, the new the new mayor of NYC.
One, yes. Get him. He is on this huge initiative to.
Melissa, let's put a pin on that, because I'm very deep into New York City politics, and the Eric Adams plans. Problematic issue for a separate teach-in. So we actually, on the city level, we, for the first time ever, have a predominantly female city council. And at least 4 currently seated city council members came to our teach-ins last year when they were candidates, are familiar with the movement, have been in touch with me since they've been in office about, are there city level initiatives that they can promote. So if one thing we want to do is get them to sign a resolution to go up to the state to say, pass this bill, I think that's going to be our no reason to disregard Eric Adams if he'll help us in that way. But I think the thing he recently announced is a little bit of a false flag operation to distract us from the $600 million. He's putting $10 million into a maternal improvement program and taking $600 million out of the DOH and the public hospitals where most of the vulnerable women are giving birth. So that's why I say that may be a false flag operation. I'm not entirely convinced to the extent to which Eric Adams is a real ally, but know many folks at the city level who would be willing and able to lend their platforms to us to bring attention to this being an important issue.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight, if you look in the chat, Katie added a link to Monique's organization there. So please, copy paste that, check that out, the Purple Heart Foundation.
Monique and I actually both have the honor and privilege to serve as board members at NYCPM Purple Heart Foundation. And so we are, if you're wondering kind of how coalition building works, we invite folks from NYC's Purple Heart to come learn about this issue. And when we have teach-ins, we'll be sending you all who register for this an email and asking you to come out to learn about those.
And that's what community essentially is, right?
Yeah.
So I love it, because how else will we know what's going on in our own individual, communities, and the things that are impacting, like the little pockets of areas, also have a huge impact on the whole, birth work community. So yeah, I'm grateful for spaces like this, because there are things, names, people, organizations that I might not have been privy to, that I'll absolutely lend my support to and look deeper into. And I appreciate the give and take, that's happening here.
Yeah, I see someone asked in the chat, they didn't see Reyes and Sepulveda supporting. I think Sepulveda may have resigned or gotten pushed up top. Just double check to see if he's still representing that district. And if he's not on board and he's generally been an ally, then he just probably hasn't heard of it. So getting 3 or 4 calls in a day saying, hey, please co-sponsor it, may be all he needs to hear back from his constituents and push him over. When I was helping organize around the 2019 doula bill, I've been making calls every 2 or 3 days to a senator's office, and then we sent out an email, and like 4 or 5 people called within an hour, and I got called back right away. And I was like, oh, they're not used to getting more than 4 or 5 calls about one issue in one day. They realized they needed to take care of this, or else they keep getting called about it.
And we had a call with Reyes a couple weeks ago. Time is like crazy.
Yes.
So I'm like, it could have been a couple days, it could have been a couple weeks, but she immediately, and that's what I really love about the, calls that we're having with people in the Assembly and in the Senate, that we're having a chance to actually, have a conversation similar to this, listen to their questions, concerns. She had questions and concerns. We talked it through, and she immediately said, yes, I'm gonna co-sponsor this. But it wasn't like, okay, tell me a little, and I'll co-sponsor it. Really in-depth conversation, so that we're being clear on what it is that we're doing here, and that if there are questions or concerns, we are lending voice to that. We're addressing it and clear some misconceptions, because I think there's been a lot of misconceptions as well. So I love when we're able to have a real, down to earth conversation, and then someone's like, oh, okay, yes, I'm absolutely sponsoring this. And I see some people are running. So thank you so much, Angelica, for coming. I see that Kate Finn said, thank you, everybody. Thank you. We appreciate you as well. Yeah, I think people are probably getting to that, that hour, maybe.
It's something, if you call and ask your folks to co-sponsor and they say yes, it usually takes about a week between the yes and them telling their staff and them like processing and getting it up on the website. So like give them a business week, and if you still don't see their name there and they told you they would, call them back and be like, thank you so much for agreeing to co-sponsor. I haven't seen your name come up yet. Were there any additional questions you had, or was there any is it just a hold up with your staff? Did you have any other questions I may be able to help you address? Also, always with your legislators, if they are asking you a question that is more specific than what you can answer, then your answer back to them is like, that is such a great question. Thank you for being this inquisitive about an issue that's important for me. I'll reach out to the folks at NYCPM and get back to you shortly with the information that you've requested. So don't be intimidated that like, oh, I don't know everything and they may ask me about things I don't know. Cool, like you can admit that, and we'll work together to make sure we get that information to the legislators. Also say with Carinas Reyes, I think Eileen Gunther and Ferris Dufront Forrest, all 3 of the registered nurses in the state assembly now support this bill. And I don't know if any RNs are listening to me, but if you want to write like this is why as RN legislators we support this bill memo and hand it to them, we could probably get them to sign off on it. I sent a little tweet in the chat a big issue with state legislators is they don't have a lot of staff, and so they may want to provide a lot of support to the bill and are also only one person with a secretary and like one or two other staff people, maybe. So like the more we can do of like, here's wording of a letter of support that you could write in your, adapt to be in your own voice. That's the type of thing where like legislators that are in our corner and are looking for ways to help us within their capacity, they're going to be like, absolutely, let me just read that. Oh, one sentence I need to change, sign off on it. Now we have a letter from all of the nurses in the assembly saying, certified nurse midwife? What? That's the patriarchy. Screw you. CPMs all the way. All right, yes. So I know people are winding down. Any final questions, comments, concerns that we can address in this space?
Laura Burns says, I'm wondering about the scope of practice issue. Okay, do you want to elaborate on what you mean by that, Laura? Or does somebody know exactly what she means?
I guess while we're
Not sure. Yeah.
oh, sorry.
You want me to
Okay.
answer, or Nubia, do you want to? Or
Well, yeah, if you know exactly what she's getting at, I was going to just
okay.
talk a
Yeah,
little
so-
bit. I don't know exactly what her question is, but I was just going to talk a little bit about the scope of practice and what that kind of looks like in the other states that do recognize it. But if you think you know exactly what she's asking,
yeah, she chatted Glick's issue.
Okay.
So basically, Glick's so her gatekeeper her name is Ginny. And Ginny is under the impression that you can graduate from high school and immediately take the NARM exam and become a CPM. We know that that is not true. NARM would not allow you to go right out of high school and take the NARM exam. You have to have certain amount of clinical hours, experiences, and so forth. And despite, countless documents that have been sent to the contrary, that seems to be a little thing she's got going on up in her head. Now, with regards to the scope of practice for a CPM, we're not asking for anything more than what a CPM would normally have. So our scope of practice is for the childbearing cycle, basically from antepartum, birth, postpartum, and newborn care. We're not asking to do more than that, and the actual specifics of the scope of practice would be more detailed in the rules and regulations.
And the rules and regulations aren't in the bill now. There's something that would come later.
Oh, yeah. So you have the statute, and then you have the rules and regs. That's
Okay.
under, yeah, and that's the same for any bill. There's the idea is to not have as much information in the statute because that's generally harder to change than the rules and regs.
I see. It just made sense to me that she would be trying to like draw a bright line between what the master's degree people could do and the people that don't have a master's, the direct entry people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that has been made clear to her multiple times, and that the hesitancy is now no longer tethered purely to logic and reason, and may have other, political and power issues at play, which is why we will become a voice we can't be ignored, and kind of push back when logic and reason are not enough for, not enough to advance our causes.
I saw another comment. Oh, were you going to address another question?
I do want to really shut down at 7:30.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's an important question though, and I want to just address it. So it was go ahead, Katie, go ahead.
Is it the mirror and the ICM thing?
Yeah, and just also wanted to acknowledge, because this is my first time meeting Regina, so welcome. And I see that she was saying that she wanted to be involved and support. So we are, embracing everybody who wants to support. This is my first time meeting you. So just want to say that, we're happy to have all the support that we can get. And then the question about, I got to scroll back up, but I think it was basically asking why not US Mirror compliant. So it's not about not being US Mirror compliant. It's about honoring different pathways, different types of learning, different type of experiences for people to get, their actual skills. And we know that when there's only a specific pathway, sometimes that does box certain people out from being able to get that type of education. And because the norm is recognizing other pathways, not just those that fit into US Mirror compliance, that if they're able to do all of the things that need to happen for them to be eligible to sit for the exam, we wouldn't want our bill to say, oh, but if you don't do it this way, then you can't be recognized as a CPM in New York, if that makes sense. So as long as they are completing all of the steps that they would need to in order to be eligible to sit for that exam, they have proven their knowledge, their education, their skills, their actual experiences, and NARM allows for them to sit for the exam. We don't want this bill to be another barrier for people to be able to get that knowledge. And I will say, for me specifically, even though I did a master's degree in midwifery program, it was a learning curve for me and the way that the information was given. And if you think about just historically how midwifery education was passed on, it was more an apprenticeship model. It wasn't just book learning. It was a lot of hands-on learning. And especially if we're talking about out-of-hospital experience, I got 0 out-of-hospital experience at SUNY downstate. I had to do all of that and gain all of that information and knowledge by sitting at the feet of more senior, experienced elder midwives who would have me. And I would hate to, I think all of us would hate to eliminate that pathway, as well. So I hope that answers the question. And then second question, if there are to be 2 boards of midwifery in New York State.
So that one, I'm just gonna, if it's okay to,
Sure.
So I think that the questions seem to be getting more specific, and that is awesome. And I think that means that is best for them to be addressed amongst folks who know what the MIRA and the ICM is. We want this teaching to be accessible also to folks who aren't midwives and aren't becoming midwives, but just generally want to support it as a reproductive justice issue. So I think that those are awesome questions and conversations for the NYCP or for the CPM community in New York to continue having, which is one of the reasons, one of our main calls to action tonight is to get involved and fill out the forms, is so that we can build those communities, continue having conversations.
Right, and keep you updated on, what's happening. And I see Vicki just said that she'd be happy to speak to that at a future point. We are going to have follow-ups to this teaching so that we can kind of keep updating as to the progress we're making in getting this bill passed. So there will be opportunities to delve a little bit deeper. This was more like this is where we are right now. People still have questions about what exactly it is that we're trying to get passed and how this is going to increase access. So
exactly. Yeah. So I just wanted to end off with 4 people who are wondering, is there not a unified enthusiasm behind this bill? I guess I'll share, as an organizer, essentially the only hesitations or reservations I have heard from folks who know more about this than I do is that this is a good bill, but may not be a perfect bill. And almost every person who has said this to me was not, and is recalcitrant to becoming familiar with the New York State legislative process. And by that, I mean in 2020 and in 2021, in the summers, which is when legislators are open to discussions about amendments and improving legislation. I have repeatedly reached out to CPMs and stakeholders within the state to say, hey, now's the time to have conversations about amendments and how to change the bill or improve the bill, and have gotten not a lot of response back, which is no shade to the current board, because none of the current board were the people who I was speaking to. There's been lots of turnover and fluidity in organizing through time. But to that point, in New York, we have 2 months to pass bills. From June to January, legislators set aside lots of times to meet with their constituents and with various organizations to help draft legislation. From January to April, they're all single-mindedly focused on budget negotiations. And from April to May, at beginning of June when the session closes, that's when they're trying to get past all the legislation they spent the last year working on with advocacy and organizational groups. So I think this bill is, lots of people who also know a lot about this are telling me this bill is better than what we have, a step in the right direction. And if in any of the ways it is not perfect, it's things that we would not be able to address in 2022 anyway. And so we would essentially have to make everyone practice illegally until 2023 and hope that we're able to get those some of the whatever changes people are arguing for amended in the process.
And as we said earlier, some of them would be addressed in the rules and regulations, but we'd have to get the bill passed first to get to that.
Really, the best and only way we know, even perfect bills have been passed and turned out terribly for reasons we could not foresee. And so I think passing a good bill and doing it in a way where we're building power, where we know how to continue to advance reproductive justice legislation, that's really the only way we're going to know how this bill plays out and if and what we need to fix in the future. And I think as a grassroots organizer, I'm very confident in lending my support to NYCPM to push this bill this year, because if any of the slightly less than perfect concerns turn out to be issues that we need to address in the future, I'm similarly committed to organizing with everyone to address those issues then. And I think a real important thing in our relationship between Movement to Birth Liberation and the New York CPM board is their willingness to organize in ways that will allow them to address issues if and when they come up in the future because of any issues with the initial bill legislation. Like the bill that got passed when I was a 3-year-old was not great, and then nobody really fixed it, and now I'm 33 and helping lead efforts to reverse it. If we had passed the bill in 1992 with thoughts that if we don't have the right thing in mind, let's be organized so that in 93 and 94 we can keep pushing till we get what we need, I think the New York birthing, the last 30 years of maternity care in New York would have a very different story. And so that is what we're trying to do differently, is organize in a way where if there continues to be problems, if they are giving us a lot of pushback with the rules and regulations, we'll have a bunch of people's emails who know how to call their legislators, who know how to use scripts to exert the pressure that we need to make sure it's actualized in a way that is the most equitable for birthing people primarily and for us birth workers who are involved. So that's kind of how I wanted, seeing more and more specific questions come up, I want to honor that those are important questions and conversations to have, and kind of indicate to folks who may not be getting that deep, I think it's great to support this bill this year, and by doing that you'll build the skills and relationship with your legislator so that if we need to fix something next year with a different bill or an amendment, we can, and it will be that much easier because of the work we put in this year. I see some elder midwives who may be from upstate New York, so if any of you knew a midwife named Robin who was catching babies at Ellis Hospital in Schenectady in 1988, say hi to me, because she caught me and I'd love to say hi back to her and let her know what I'm up to now. But I think, guys, thank you so much for coming out tonight. Again, we will do our best to follow up with everybody who's been filling out these forms. If you're having any trouble filling out the forms, or like internet is a second language for you, just type in the chat, like to be connected, need more help, and we'll make sure that we reach out to you one way or another to make sure that you are involved in these efforts. Anything else before we say goodnight?
I think that's it. Somebody was asking that she's not in New York right now, but is a native New Yorker and wants to know, she's in Texas, how can she support? So.
Okay, so folks out of state, okay, so I guess like I'm so myopically focused sometimes on New York State politics. Let me think. Boost us on social media, loop in your friends who live in New York who may not have heard about this. If you know how to use Twitter, it'd be great if you got spicy at New York politicians, because it won't ever come back to you. Like if I get spicy at a politician, I may see them next year. You can get spicy at a politician and like, whatever. What else? And I think we'll like and if you have time and capacity, I know we could use help like making infographics with various organizational behind the scenes type things. So if you have time to just be helping out with that stuff from out of state, we'd love you on Canva helping us make graphics, you know, like taking cool quotes out of this teaching, making them into little infographics, help get the word out, etc. So yeah.
We'll make sure that if you got an email about this, you will continue to get emails about our future, updated meetings and just updates in general about what we're up to. And if you got this information by way of somebody else, but you join like Friends of NYCPM, then we will also have your contact information. Make sure that we include you in all correspondence, and that you are alerted about our future teach-in updates as well.
Oh, and on that note, our next teach-in is April 19th. You don't have to
Yes.
you don't have to wonder anymore. Put it on your calendars. We'll be doing like a brief review of the things we talked about tonight, get into any updates, etc. So
and then Vicky asks, can someone tell her how to save the chat? But doesn't that get saved in the recording? I think it does. I'm not tech savvy. I'm probably
it
not.
does get saved in recording, and I'm the person who will be able to end it as the main host now. So I'll just copy paste it to a Word document just in case. And yeah, Regina, if I don't see you on the form, I will make sure someone from NYCPM can reach out to you, because it sounds like you have lots of wisdom to share, and we'd love to
keep you looped in.
Yeah, be in conversation. All right, everyone, it's been
amazing
spending this time with you, and I hope you have a great night. Looking forward to working with you on the future. Have a great night. Bye.
Night, everyone.